welcome everybody who's watching this. My name's Tier, and I'm here today with Marleis and Laura, and we're going to be talking to them about their careers in speech language pathology. So I'll just get going with the introduction. So if Laura and Marleis, you can just let everybody know a little bit about who you are, maybe your age, where you're from, maybe some of your hobbies outside of work, and what your career title is.
Okay, I guess I'll start off. So my name is Laura and I'm 27. I live in Vancouver and I love soccer. I think most people who know me know that, and all my kids that I work with, I talk about it all the time. Also, especially in the winter, love snowboarding. I like just exploring Vancouver, checking out new restaurants. Also enjoy music, like guitar. Yeah, that's kind of the gist.
Awesome. And Marleis.
I'm Marleis. I am also 27, also born and raised in Vancouver, and you guys might find that Laura and I have a lot of overlap in our journey throughout this interview. I am also a speech language pathologist, and when I'm not working, I do really like to dance. I'm also a fitness instructor on the side and a Zumba instructor, so that's like my playtime. And I like hiking and reading and movies and all that jazz.
Wow, you got a lot going on outside of work. That sounds great.
You got to have something else besides work.
Totally. Totally. So I'll just get both of you guys to answer again, kind of how you found your decision to become an SLP. What was that journey like? How did you discover this profession?
Okay, so for me, actually, it kind of started in high school. I had a career day where a bunch of different people from different career paths came in and kind of did a little short presentation. And someone who I actually work under today came in and did a presentation, and I thought, man, that looks fun. Like, is that work? Do people get paid for that? That seems great. So that's kind of what inspired me initially. And then I wanted to learn more. Then I job shadowed a neighbor that did it, and I still enjoyed it. I kind of dove into courses in psychology and linguistics and found that I really enjoyed both those kind of domains. And so that's fitting for the profession. And then overall, I knew I wanted to do a people helping profession, something that made a meaningful difference for people. And also, I really know about myself, like I don't like being in the spotlight in front of a big group. So I knew teaching was out, but I do really enjoy one-on-one and small group interactions and kind of blending like being creative while also doing something that challenges me mentally with like in my thinking and using kind of like that science-based approach. So yeah, it just seemed like a really good blend.
Awesome. Awesome. Cool.
Yeah, similarly for me, I heard about it in high school, actually from a family friend who had just gone through the process of schooling and was entering the workforce as a speech language pathologist. And she couldn't say enough great things about it. And same with Laura, just kind of seemed to jive with some of the things I was looking for probably in my job going forward. So definitely working with people. I didn't love the idea of like just sit at a desk without much interaction. I love to talk, and communication is something that I enjoy a lot in all its modes. So I thought, hey, that kind of might fit me. Yeah, it wasn't this like instant, like this is my passion kind of thing. When I heard about it, I just kind of thought, this is interesting. I didn't have any other ideas. I thought, well, I'm graduating, I need a plan. So I'll plan backwards. Let's say I want to end up with this as my career. What do I have to do to get there? And then, so I entered undergrad, first year university based on, well, if I just keep going on a path, this is where I'll end up. So I planned backwards from there. And then I was totally open to anything else catching my heart along the way. I was just kind of like, but I want a plan. And nothing, I didn't like anything else as much. And that just started to grow as, throughout the coursework. And then you shadow people, your summer jobs, you kind of try to orient, towards something related. And I also personally knew of the need, you know, there's not enough SLPs for those who need speech and language services, from family members who've just kind of been in the system and been needing services and have been just waitlisted throughout their school journey, and then, you know, as an adult maybe still need speech services and it's hard to come by, because lots of the intervention is kind of channeled towards younger people in early intervention, which is research based, but then kind of the older people aging out and into adulthood maybe get left behind a little bit. So I kind of had that pull on my heart as well from that personal experience.
Awesome. I love your strategy in it and feeling like you could fill a need, but also knowing that it fit your niche a little bit. And I love that both of you found out about this through word of mouth from other people, because, you know, SLPs maybe isn't the first thing that you think of when you think of, you know, in the healthcare industry. And I think that it's great that I can highlight this, because I think it's an amazing profession. And like you said, absolutely a necessity for all demographics and all ages. So that's great. And Marleis, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but I just want to highlight for our members how actually you become an SLP. Like, what's the educational pathway? What kind of what's the process?
Certainly. So in Canada, you need a master's degree in speech language pathology. It might be called something slightly different in each school, like what your actual degree is. But you need that specific degree, and it's a master's degree in Canada. So you need an undergraduate degree to get your master's. And that is actually pretty flexible, what that degree is. You need a degree and you need all of the prerequisites that master's program requires. And those are not all the same across the board at schools in Canada as well. So as you're searching for schools to apply for, if this is something you're interested in, really you got to do the homework and see what are their requirements. So Laura and I both did. Sorry, what was your undergrad, Laura?
I did my major in psychology, my minor in linguistics.
Okay,
Yeah.
and I did the reverse. I did a major in linguistics and a minor in psychology, just because the bulk of the prereqs at UBC, University of British Columbia, where we were, needed most of those. And I thought, you know, let's get this over with. School's not my favorite thing, full disclosure. It's so important, but yeah, it's not my favorite mode of being. But we had lots of classmates who had done other degrees, biology. We had teachers who had like done teaching degree and been in that profession and then decided to switch gears. So yeah, you as long as you have the prerequisites, it doesn't really matter what your undergraduate degree is, just how much time you want to be in school.
Right. Awesome. Okay, so definitely check the school that you're interested in going to that offers that master's program, and then just make sure you check off all the prereqs.
Certainly, yeah. Okay. And then I don't know if they require this anymore, but the GRE for a couple of schools, I had to write the
U of A.
Yeah, in Alberta.
Yeah, and some in Ontario.
Yes, just the general exam for like how grad school ready am I, that requires a bit of studying just for the like types of questions that it is. So you kind of want to get that sense. And then after you graduate from the program, in order to practice, you need to pass the SAC exam, which is basically licensing exam. So it's not just your degree, you then study to pass this test that is all related to your degree, obviously. Right. And then you do need to pay, and I don't have the numbers at the top off the top of my head, but to maintain that license, you need to pay the college each year. That's like the governing body for SLPs, and maintain continuing credits.
Okay. Yeah. Continuing education, things like that,
Yeah.
all that great stuff.
Yeah.
Education never ends.
No, exactly. And thank goodness for that, because we always want to be doing our work based on the latest evidence. But yeah, that's
Right.
important to note as well. That
Okay.
you need to maintain that license to
Right.
work. And then this may be a little bit off topic, but you graduate a generalist, and then there are certain areas of the profession where in order to do that in your job, you need to have specific education for that. And I'm thinking of like swallowing disorders. Folks may not know that a speech language pathologist is also responsible for swallowing disorders because the anatomy is all the same. There's just different physiology for the different functions. So if you're really into that, that could be your little niche within this niche of the SLP world. I don't really work in that much at all, but
so you can specialize kind of within the field
exactly what I meant.
of
Yes.
SLP. Okay, gotcha. No, that's great. That's nice to know that there's other options within the broad spectrum.
Yes.
So, yeah, sure. No, that provides a little bit of diversity within the profession. So that's always a great thing.
Certainly, that was another thing that definitely drew me to consider the profession, is just your day-to-day looks totally different depending on what area you're working in. Kids versus adults, within schools versus a public clinic, in hospitals, and with the exception of like swallowing, where you need specific education and training for some of those things in the hospital, you don't need to go back to school to switch from those different avenues. And that was appealing to me because, as I said, school's not my favorite mode. And so that was really exciting that within the same profession, I could have many different jobs that looked very different throughout the course of my life. That was motivating for me as well.
Right. Awesome. Okay, just a wealth of knowledge right there for anybody who's interested. That's awesome. I'll kind of direct some questions at each of you. So Laura, I'm wondering, throughout your master's program or after you graduated, when you started practicing fully, was there anything that you were not prepared for? You know, because you said you shadowed and things like that. Was there anything that maybe wasn't advertised or highlighted in those shadowing experiences or in the job description that came to light after you started practicing as an SLP?
Ooh, I feel like there's constant learning. I think in our particular grad program, they really wanted us to dive into the research and the theory. And so we'd spend hours creating lesson plans for particular clients. And in the real work world, where we have so many clients, it's just not possible to go that in depth. So it's kind of the training set you up for the theory, and you know well from that, and that does set us up for success. However, it is kind of counter in the sense of you actually do have to manage your time in a much faster way when you're on the job. I think my eyes were open to like the reality of charting and how on top of that you have to be. What else? I think like a pleasant surprise in our grad program was, as kind of Marleis was touching, like all the different avenues. When I kind of was researching it on my own before I got into the program, I kind of had a sense, like I saw the text, I saw the websites that alluded to that, but really in grad school, like my mind was blown over and over and over again about all the ways that SLPs can be involved in taking care of people. So like even the swallowing aspect of it, or using like augmentative communication with technology, and kind of like eating plans and the sensory piece. So yeah, I kind of forgot exactly what question you asked me, but maybe Marleis can kind of hop on that train and figure out the other part.
I would have to agree with Laura that those, just the managing time and what may be a research-based assessment or mode of therapy, you may not have the time in your caseload to use that one. So yeah, always doing that dance of like time versus quality and caring for your clients the best that you can. So and you learn that as you go. As Laura said, every day is learning experience. So
Wow. Yeah, I
yeah,
can
there's lots to
imagine.
learn after school. And as Laura alluded to as well, the paperwork, I was not, I was prepared like once I was in grad school, because that's what we did a lot of in school. But I think going into the decision process, I was just thinking about how exciting it would be to be able to help people and provide therapy services. But as the professional that we are, there's a lot of paperwork that goes into it that is very important, so that we have documentation that keeps us accountable, and that our clients have documentation so they're on the same page and they are empowered to know about their own communication needs and strengths, and then also to be able to adapt it and be in control of it as best they can. So, but yeah,
Absolutely.
there's paperwork often.
Yeah. Sometimes the administration side of jobs just is not something that you kind of are highlighting or thinking about, and then it becomes a major aspect that you weren't thinking it was going to be there. So no,
Yes.
that's great. You pointed out a lot of different things that sometimes aren't key features that are highlighted in people's presentations. So thank you for that. So I'll just ask, were there any times in your program that you maybe reconsidered your specialty or becoming an SLP? Were there any times that, or maybe that it confirmed that you were headed in the right direction?
Ooh, I think in my, I think in the master's program, kind of what I mentioned before, I was just super excited about all that I was learning that I didn't realize going into it. So that motivated me into our profession even more. I would say I got even more motivated and excited. Yes, the program was super intense, but you go through it with such an amazing group of peers, and it's just kind of having the sense of, okay, this is something that's meaningful. I'm going to be a continual lifelong learner, and if you like to challenge your mind, that is an exciting piece of it. So yeah, and I think it was confirmed as well a lot by the practicums we had. So we had to have 5 practicums in a bunch of different domains, as Marleis was saying. So I had a couple of my major ones in hospital, but then I also had one in the school system on the island, 5 different schools with different clinical educators, and then also one at the private practice, actually where we are now. And so that is just, I felt like that was a confirmation too, because you just get feedback from your clinical educator saying, hey, like, this is a good fit, you're doing well with the kids, or hey, like, it seems like you're really interested in this, working with adults post-stroke or whatever it is. So I think in that sense it was helpful. And then it also was kind of guiding, because I didn't feel as comfortable with the swallowing assessment side of it. Not comfortable, but I didn't feel as passionate about it. So it kind of helped me figure out my avenue going forth. Yeah.
Right. Awesome. Anything for you, Marleis?
No, not really.
Okay.
Anything to add similar.
Good.
I think, yeah, maybe in like 3rd year undergrad, you've been at it for a little while, but you're not right at the end. You get that little like, do I even want to be doing it? But I don't think that was related to the profession as much, just like the school mode, for me.
Absolutely. A little bit of a senioritis just kicking in a little bit.
Yes. And really, the specific training and education comes in the master's program. So it can be hard sometimes when your education is more general in your undergrad, but your goal is so specific, to see where it kind of connects and is going to become fruitful. But I would say that's probably with any kind of master's program, if you're gunning for it, that you kind of got to just find ways to be motivated through the steps that you need to get you there.
Right. Okay, awesome. Well, Laura, you kind of talked about how you like kind of working one-on-one with people. And I'm curious, how often is it that SLPs work with other healthcare professionals? Is it usually that one-on-one interaction, or is it like, often working with kids that you work with their families too? Like what is kind of, what's the dynamic there?
Good question.
Yeah, great question. It is very collaborative, I'd say. Like within the session, sometimes it can be one-on-one with the kiddo, depending on how old the child is. Usually when they're like when they're young kids, we want the parents involved because it's a lot of like kind of strategies that we can be teaching the parents, whether that's how to play with their kids, because sometimes that doesn't come naturally to parents. Maybe it's how to model language. So not using too much language with kids that are at like a 1 or 2 word level. We want to kind of match or just be 1 word beyond that. So all these strategies that we've learned through our training that maybe aren't known by the family. So we want to equip them so that we're not just an hour with the kid and then there's nothing done until the next time they see us. We want to equip them so these strategies and kind of the therapy per se is being carried out by the family throughout the week. That's where we're going to see more and more gains as we team with the families. So yeah, especially within our clinic, it's very play-based and we encourage the family to be involved. Sometimes one part of speech language pathology is working on social skills, understanding emotions and working on reciprocal conversations and kind of knowing like nonverbals and all of that. So we usually have social groups with that, and that can range in numbers, but that would involve more kids. In terms of being in schools, you're working alongside educational assistants and helping them to understand how to support the students in classes. You're informing teachers about kind of the student's strengths and weaknesses, so they need to be on board and know how to support the student. And then also a lot of kiddos with autism, which is a lot of the caseload of Marleis and I, they also have home teams. So that's governed by like a behavioral consultant, and then there's behavioral interventionists that work under their plan. So we need to know what our role is in comparison to what their role is, what they're targeting, what we're targeting. So there's a lot of communication and yeah, kind of correspondence with them in some regard. And then in the hospital system, yeah, you're collaborating. Maybe you're doing like a co-session with an occupational therapist or a physiotherapist because there's only maybe so much rehab time. So I'd say like for kids, especially with the child development centers, they really tried to collaborate, and you'll see maybe more occupational therapists and physiotherapists working alongside the SLPs during a joint session. Yeah, that's the kind of highlight some of that.
That's awesome. Yeah, that does sound quite collaborative, and you got to be all coordinated in accomplishing kind of an end goal. That's awesome. And then Laura, you kind of talked about a couple of the patients that you might see, but Marleis, can you kind of explain to some of the students who maybe don't really know what an SLP's role really entails? What kind of patients do you see? Who comes to see an SLP?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would describe a speech language pathologist as a communication specialist, which, you know, maybe folks have had experience kind of like with a kind of specific aspect of what the job might entail, but really it's communication. Our goal is to help people communicate what they need to communicate, whatever that is, with whoever they need to, and that really broadens our role. So someone who used to be able to communicate functionally and has lost that ability from a degenerative disease, a stroke, brain trauma, they would need help with communication. Kids who for whatever reason are not developing language on the trajectory or at the pace that we would expect for their age, might need a little bit of a boost. They might have a disability, like a developmental disability, that's also a bit of a barrier in helping them communicate effectively. Or it could be kind of what I think of like your classic speech pathologist, like in a school, is like someone has difficulty pronouncing certain sounds, or you know, like your classic like lisping, or R's are tricky because it's a heinously difficult sound. And my name has it smack dab in the middle. So does Laura, actually. We both have some tricky sounds in our name.
And the L.
Yeah, me too. My R and L are right beside each other, so it's mean.
You both have names that they can just practice over and over and over again.
Yes, yes. Stuttering is kind of a small percentage of folks have that challenge, but also communication, right? It's basically, if there's any breakdown in communication in any way, it's in our scope.
Right.
And
Wow.
that's part of the puzzle, is figuring out, okay, where is actually the breakdown in the whole system of brain and muscles and emotions that are required to get that message out, and then to help them where it's most helpful. So
right.
That's not the exhaustive list, but we don't have time. So.
Yeah. I think just to add to that, Marleis, like for the language side, some kids have a long time or have a hard time with understanding questions and using questions and knowing how to initiate a social interaction, or knowing vocabulary, using a bunch of vocab, and knowing verb tense and that kind of thing. So we also have that language piece there too.
Yes, yeah. Thanks for adding that, Laura. The difference between speech and language. So language would be like the content, right? Can they ask a question? Can they answer a question that you've asked? Do they have a word for that? Speech would be, does that word sound like what I want it to?
Right. Okay. Good distinction between kind of the two elements of your roles. That's awesome. Yeah. Great. Well, how long typically do you guys see your patients, and how, like, I mean, that could be, you know, within the week, or, you know, probably depending on the person's circumstances, but do you have these patients for like long-term clients that you see for years, or what's kind of, how long and how often do you see your patients?
Laura and I really have the luxury of being, I mean, it really depends on what your job is and in what capacity you're working. Laura and I have the luxury of being in private practice, where sometimes it's a little bit easier to see the same client long-term if they need it. Whereas, you know, if they're at the Child Development Center, they're going to age out. If they're in a school, they might age out of that school, that sort of thing. It really is, you assess the need, you recommend how frequent based on that family, that client, their need, and you make a recommendation of, whoa, a hat just fell on me. It's a hat. But then also, it's not an ideal world, so you kind of are also working off of how much funding a client has, or personal funds able to allocate to it, and scheduling. So it really depends.
Yeah, that was my next question. Just like as a logistic, I know that it's probably different maybe in Alberta or BC, or maybe it's not, but is this something that's kind of classified under the same brand or same umbrella as like physios and chiropractors? People can get allocated certain funds in their healthcare benefits, and they just have certain amounts allocated for this type of assessment and things like that?
Yeah, each family would have to check with their insurance policy. I know it's not covered under just like basic kind of healthcare, but if through work you get insurance coverage, that would be great.
And then I would also add that for kiddos with autism, they have funding from the government. So that's where a lot of our funding at the clinic comes from.
Yes, in BC, BC is the best place to live if you have autism. There's a lot of government funding. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Now, because you both work in a private kind of sector, what is some of the differences in I guess some of the clients that you see in your private place of work versus like the hospital or in the schools? Well, obviously in the schools you're going to see students, but what are some of the major differences between working in a private clinic versus the hospital?
Okay, so I'll start with that one. With the hospital, as Marleis has kind of mentioned, it's a lot more rehab. So whether that's someone that had a stroke or some sort of traumatic brain injury, they initially had language and speech that was, you know, fully functional, and then they lost it. And so sometimes that actually, just to add this part, sometimes that includes a little bit more of the counseling aspect of our role, because you're partnering with families that have gone through a lot of trauma. So there's, through the hospital, they can usually have some inpatient rehabilitation. That's kind of on the daily, the weekly. And then after that, once they're sent home, then they might have weekly appointments doing outpatient rehab. But that's only for so long. And then they just tried to get linked up with some sort of community services. And even though we can have adult clients at our private practice, they're pretty few and far between, because a lot of people don't have the finances to support that. It is quite a lot of money. And so like extended health runs out pretty quickly. So yeah, in a sense, that's kind of sad. I wish there was more financial support for adults who've gone through that. Marleis, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, just to clarify, so whereas in a hospital, you would probably be seeing a certain type of client, and in a school, you see a certain, like you see school age kids, the beauty of private practice is, as a generalist, you get to see whoever calls, and that literally could be anyone who needs support with communication. So 2-year-old, 18-month-old, 80-year-old, like you could get anyone. And I think different clinics maybe just get more referrals for, if those clinicians have specialization in one area or the other. But we've seen it, our clinic tends to be children, probably because of that financial
support
piece. Yeah.
Right. Wow.
But that may not be across the board.
Okay. Wow. So as a generalist, you really need to know all of the scope, and you got to be prepared for whoever comes in. That's a big role. So to touch on something that Laura was kind of talking about, an interesting question came up in our last interview about emotional vulnerability with patients. And there's always an important balance that healthcare professionals have to keep between, empathy, but also professionalism. And I'm just wondering if either of you have an example of where you've had to either utilize that or find that balance between those two things, or if you're still working that out. Anything on that scope?
I think that's a super valuable question, and something important for students and professionals to just be cognizant of before you find yourself in a situation where you are experiencing emotional vulnerability, because we are helping people in this profession and other professions like occupational therapy, physical therapy, etc. But you do kind of learn as you go as well. But I think like who you are and how you react to things, it doesn't really change, depending where you are. And so showing care, I think, is always really important. But also knowing what is your responsibility and what isn't. And I think throughout your whole life, you're learning that with regards to your personal relationships and your professional relationships. From just like a liability standpoint, even, right? Just know when you are not going to be able to provide what this person needs. And so be prepared to be referring out and to think about how you want to have those conversations. An example that I have is parents of a child with a disability. That can be really, really extra. It's hard to be a parent anyways, but there's a grieving process and I wasn't prepared for this often feeling, and parents sometimes, because they're in the parent role, feel like, I'm the one helping, I'm the one supporting, and they often need support in that journey. And so, I think for me, having a bit of a plan of how I'm going to approach that conversation of like, hey, what do you think about pursuing some, support for yourself, and being encouraging, and how to approach those conversations. yeah, it's a learning curve. And I don't think they always, you know, they never feel like, oh, I'm 100% prepared for this difficult conversation. But I can't be counselor to that mom. That's not, I don't have training for that. It's not going to help her most. I can be empathetic for sure. And I think we have a responsibility to as healthcare professionals, but yeah, also referring out when help is needed that we can't provide is really important.
I love that, Marleis. Thank you. Anything you want to add to that, Laura?
Yeah, I think adding to that, I think what was hard for me initially is that you care so much about your clients and you have such a heart for the families that sometimes it's hard to kind of have that business mind and not just extend grace upon grace upon grace if, like, you know, sessions are missed or whatever. And I kind of had to learn, like, if there's almost a pattern, figure out why. Like, usually there's a reason. So maybe the family is really burnt out and they're totally emotionally exhausted or stressed by finances. So just kind of have that honest conversation with them and see, how can I support you? I'm noticing that we're missing a few and I really care about your child, right? And so whether that's setting up respite workers and seeing kind of what avenues and community can support their kids so that they can have those moments to go for coffee or to just kind of do some self-care for themselves, that's going to serve their kid well and us well going forward for therapy. So that part. And then I think just in general, that emotional connection with clients, I think we always, Marleis and myself and the whole team at the clinic, it's always, you know, relationship first. So you want the kid to feel comfortable and safe with you and know that they're cared for. And so you're always kind of doing a check-in. Hey, what's new with you? How's your day going? And how are we feeling, right? Before we start diving into the therapy activities, so they know. It's all about building rapport and then kind of diving into the plan from there. So
that's a beautiful model. I love that.
Can I just add as well, I was talking about like parents who feel that like I'm the giver and needing support. And then also I just want to speak to, as professionals who are in a role where by the nature of our job, we are giving help and support. It's also important to be cognizant of our own reserves of energy, of, you know, you can't give what you don't have. And it is a-okay and actually important to be aware of when we need our own support for dealing with some difficult, you know, people wouldn't be coming to us if they didn't need help. And often some of those situations make us feel, you know, really sad in our giving heart. And so that's important that we have our own supports and don't feel like we need to just give without stocking up. And Laura was talking a little bit about self-care and stuff, but for us as well, and finding those other things in our lives that helps us be able to do our job for a good long while. And it's super important.
Yeah. That's actually a beautiful segue into what was my next question was, what are the things that you guys do to kind of balance some of the intense moments that you have at work and be able to fill your cup back up?
Yeah, honestly, self-care has been the biggest learning curve this year for me. I just am a go person, whatever the word is, go getter. So I have a really hard time building into my schedule times to relax and just have downtime, but I know it's needed because otherwise I can feel burnt out by the end of the second week. So yeah, I think usually for me, soccer is a really good outlet because you have that fitness, you have social, you just kind of get all the stressors out in a really healthy way. So with COVID, that's been hard. I haven't had that, but exercise is a really good one. And yeah, just kind of scheduling in those chill days to go for a walk or just do something mindless, like watch a TV show or have a cup of tea, that kind of thing. So yeah.
Awesome. What about you, Marleis? What's your kind of unwind refresh?
Specifically, I mean, I love music and dancing. I just dance around my kitchen, blast the music, like specifically, but I think what like a strategy more of what Laura's saying, like build in that time, and saying no to meetings and activities sometimes is difficult for me. And I think actually I have COVID to thank for bringing that to the forefront of my mind. I'm like, no one can go anywhere, and yet, you know, I have 3 meetings in an evening, kind of thing. And so it's kind of forced me to just look at it kind of more head on, but building in that time. And for me, yeah, like that obviously that physical activity, you know, we know is so important for managing stress and keeping us healthy and everything. And then social time as well, in whatever capacity we're allowed to at the moment. And yeah, and my personal relationships are very important to me, and so cultivating those. Also, and this is me, but that, like, I need silent time as well as doing things. I need to just kind of be still. And I'm also Roman Catholic, and that faith piece of my life honestly is really probably the biggest thing that kind of grounds me in just being reflective and being mindful and being aware, and centered on, you know, is my life, and am I where I want to be right now, and who I want to be, and that I find very fulfilling as well. So those are probably the biggest pieces for me.
Yeah, awesome. That grounding and that intentionality to create time for yourself and to set boundaries are all awesome ways to do that. So kind of continue on the lighter note, what are some of the most rewarding parts about your job? What's some of your favorite aspects to being an SLP?
Oh man, there's so many. It's just, especially working with kids, it's hilarious. Like, you'll get so many funny quotes out of the day, and based on like who the client is. I have one client every Monday that will show me his newest dance that he's created. So just like those little rituals that you do with certain clients, and oh, it's just, kids are just so fun. So I love their energy and just how hilarious they are. So that brings a lot of joy. I think both Marleis and I love being creative and seeing how we can intertwine a goal that they have to work on into a really fun activity, and maybe make that seasonal or just something that's related to their interests. I have a lot of boys that love cars and dinosaurs, so I have a lot of materials around those things. So yeah, I think it's just like really satisfying when you can find a way to integrate their interests into what you're doing and just see the huge smile on their face. I think other encouraging moments is when, and it's not always said, but when families or parents reach out and say, hey, I really appreciate your help, or you're doing a lot for my kid, like it means the world to me. I'm a words of affirmation person, so if I have a few of those peppered in the year, that really builds me up. So yeah, and I think just seeing the growth in kids, and I think even just, especially with older kids, like some of my grade 6, I'm working on some R sounds and some kind of later developing speech sounds. And even when they come and say, hey, Laura, I'm feeling more confident with my friends now, or I'm starting to use this sound, really well, and it was so exciting, just kind of those reflection moments. It kind of brings you back, okay, all this hard work is going towards something really meaningful, like socially and just for their life going forward. So I think those moments are really helpful for us, that put a lot of love and hard work into it. So
yeah. Seeing confidence built back up in kids must be super rewarding. I can only imagine.
Yeah.
Well, Laura's got to go here in a little bit, but I'll just kind of ask one more question. So, Marleis, since I didn't give you a chance to answer the last one, can you just give us like a quick synopsis of what an average day of an SLP kind of looks like?
No, there's no such thing.
No.
Give
us an example of what yesterday looked like, or today.
Sure thing. Yeah. So I showed up at the clinic and prepped my first session. I spent a lot of the day playing on the floor with the kids who come in if they're kids, and we don't plan the floor if they're not. But yeah, a 2-year-old, quickly followed by a virtual session with a 12-year-old working on yeah, like more nuances of conversation and how to hold a conversation, rather than like with the 2-year-old we're working like, can he say ball when he wants the ball? I did some phone calling to liaise with some other team members for my clients, so they're inclusion teachers at school and their behavior interventionists, to make sure we're on the same page. And then I called some parents to ask for pictures of things that their kids like, so I can involve them in the next session. I didn't have a feeding client today, but sometimes you do. And so you're sitting there playing with food and eating snacks. Yeah, and now with COVID, cleaning in between all of the sessions. Yeah, it really depends. And some of those sessions, the client is in there on their own, and sometimes they're with family. My days are pretty much 9 to 5, you know, give or take, with some breaks between, and then charting between each client as well. And that's the day.
Wow, I can imagine how that could vary just depending on who's coming in, but
that's exactly it. And really that's the beauty of it, is that my day can look completely different depending on who's coming in, and that's what it's about, right? Because we're helping that individual, and so they're going to shape what our time together looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll give both of you kind of a chance as we wrap up to talk about anything that I didn't cover or didn't ask that you would really like to share with people about your profession or anything surrounding being an SLP.
You want to start, Marleis?
Sure.
Okay.
And I don't think this is specific to speech language pathology, but any kind of healthcare profession where you're supporting people with it, you know, a need that they have. There's really a beautiful opportunity with each client that you have to just in your own mind and heart value them, but also show them how they are valued just for who they are. And often they're coming to you, you know, and you're working on something that they find hard or that they can't do yet. And often, you know, with all of us, we have that negativity bias. It's like, this is the thing that's so hard for me. But we as professionals have that beautiful opportunity to just value that person for who they are and nothing else, and also be working on things that you want to support them with. But I think it's really important to remember that you have that opportunity to value them and show them that they're valued, and that can really go a long way. It goes a long way in having that relationship be positive and your whole career be effective, I think.
Yeah, beautiful vulnerable exchange.
I love that. Yeah, I don't think I can really add much more to that. That was beautiful, Marleis. I think yeah, just highlights of the profession is that it's, as we were sharing, the day is always new. It's always fresh. It's always ever changing based on your clients. And so you're never going to get bored. You might get exhausted, but it's because kids have so much energy, and but it's a fun time. And then you'll recharge, you'll plan in that self-care, and then you'll keep going. And there's always new learning, there's always new courses, and that's also really inspiring, and you can kind of implement that right away. And we've done a few of those together, Marleis and I. So that's fun too. And I think it's just like super relational, and that's what it's about. So yeah, I don't know if there's more questions. I think we're open to kind of hearing them, but I would strongly advocate for SLP. I think it's a much misunderstood profession. People usually think about lisps and speech sounds and miss the forest, the huge scope that we actually encounter. So Yeah.
That's awesome. No, I super appreciate all the information that you guys have given us. I will obviously will give this to our students, and if any of them or if any of you guys have questions who are watching this, you can just email me and I'll forward them off to Laura and Marleis, and they can maybe give you some additional answers. But I just want to say a huge thank you to Marleis and Laura for joining us today and sharing their time with us to explain about being an SLP and what that all entails. So thank you to both of you for being here. It was an absolute privilege, and yeah, we'll hopefully talk again.
Sounds great. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.